The great ship Concordia floated in the cold black of space like a silver city. Inside its metal walls, beings from across the galaxy walked together in peace. The war was over now. The coalition had won. Earth's children had helped make that victory possible. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the main hall watching aliens from dozens of worlds move past her. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated in special tanks filled with water. A few moved on six legs that clicked against the floor. All of them were here for the same reason. They wanted to learn about each other. They wanted to understand their new allies. Tonight was Culture Night. Each species would share something from their home world. Stories, music, art, food. Elena had volunteered to speak for Earth. She carried a small tablet with her favorite human stories loaded on it. Myths and legends that had lived in human hearts for thousands of years. The hall filled up as evening came. Elena looked around at the crowd. Near the front sat the Zephyrians. They were tall beings made of what looked like living crystal. Their bodies caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. Everyone knew they were very smart. Some said they were the smartest race in the galaxy. They loved logic and facts and numbers. Behind them were the Kree. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and big black eyes. Their skin was hard like armor. When they talked, they made clicking sounds with their mouths. They had been fighting the Coalition's enemies for a long time before Earth joined the war. On the left side of the hall, the Dolmari sat in their water tanks. They had long bodies like dolphins, but with arms and hands. Tubes connected their tanks to bigger pools where they lived on the ship. Their blue skin moved in waves when they got excited. Elena had met all of these species before. They had fought together in the war. They had bled together. They had won together. But that did not mean they understood each other. A voice spoke over the room's speakers. Tonight we share the stories that made us who we are. Ambassador Vasquez from Earth will speak first. Elena walked to the front of the room. She looked out at hundreds of alien faces. Some had no faces at all. She took a deep breath and began, "My people love stories," she said. "We have told them since we first learned to speak. They teach us about right and wrong. They show us what we can become. Tonight I want to share some of our oldest tales with you." She touched her tablet. The lights dimmed. Pictures appeared on the walls around the room. A man in ancient armor holding a sword, a woman with snakes for hair, a giant wooden horse. "This is the story of Theseus," Elena began. "Long ago, a terrible monster lived under the city of Athens. It was called the Minotaur, half man, half bull. Every year, Athens had to send 7 young men and 7 young women to feed this beast. Theseus was a prince. He could have stayed safe in his palace, but he chose to go into the dark maze where the monster lived. She told them how Theseus fought the Minotaur with just a sword and his courage. How he found his way out of the maze that had trapped so many others. How he saved his people from fear. When she finished, she expected questions. Instead, she heard something else. Laughter. It started with one Zephyrian, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Then another joined in. Soon half the crystal beings were making that musical laughing sound. High Counselor Zethavar stood up. His crystal body flashed bright blue, which Elena knew meant he was amused. "Ambassador," he said in his voice like breaking glass, "surely this is entertainment for your young?" No thinking being could believe such things actually happened. Elena felt her face get warm. "These stories are important to us. They teach us about fantasy," interrupted another Zephyrian. "About impossible things that could never be real." The Kree started clicking now. Elena had learned this meant they were laughing too. Ambassador Ziktar raised one of his forearms. "A creature that is half one thing and half another? A maze built underground just to hold it? These are the thoughts of children, not a species that helped win a galactic war." Elena tried to stay calm. "The stories might not be exactly true, but they represent primitive thinking," said Counselor Murthai from her water tank. Her dolphin-like head bobbed up and down. "My people left such simple tales behind 1,000,000 years ago. We are surprised that Earth still clings to them." More aliens joined the laughter now. The Vorthan, who looked like walking trees, rustled their leaves in amusement. The small gray Nexari made high peeping sounds. Even some of the floating energy beings called Luminari pulsed with what Elena knew was their version of laughter. Elena felt her hands shake. She had expected questions about human culture. She had not expected to be mocked like a child telling silly stories. Perhaps, said Zethvar, his voice cutting through the noise, the humans could share some real history. Instead, stories of actual events. We are interested in facts, not fantasies. Elena looked around the room. Every alien face she could see showed the same thing. They thought humans were foolish. They thought Earth's greatest stories were jokes. She touched her tablet again. Another picture appeared. This time it showed Hercules fighting a lion with his bare hands. "This is Hercules," she said, her voice steady despite her anger. "The strongest hero in our myths. He completed 12 impossible tasks. The laughter got louder. Some aliens were making sounds Elena had never heard before. She realized they were sharing jokes about humans in their own languages. A being with the strength to move mountains? Ziktar clicked rapidly. To kill monsters with his hands? Ambassador, even your war records show humans are among the physically weakest species in the coalition. These stories damage your credibility, added Zethvar. How can we trust military reports from a species that believes in such impossible things? Elena's anger grew hot in her chest, but she was a diplomat. She had trained for years to keep her feelings hidden. She smiled and nodded. "Thank you for your feedback," she said. "Perhaps other species would like to share their cultures now." The evening continued. Other aliens told their stories. The Zephyrians shared mathematical poems that described the birth of stars. The Kree performed a war dance that had no fantasy in it, only real movements from real battles. The Dolmari sang songs about the deep ocean trenches of their homeworld. Each time they finished, they looked at Elena with pity. Poor humans with their silly myths and impossible heroes. Elena sat through it all, her smile never changing, but inside her heart burned with shame and anger. They did not understand. They thought human stories were lies. They had no idea how wrong they were. The next morning, Elena walked through the ship's corridors feeling tired. She had not slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the alien laughter from the night before. The sound followed her like a bad dream. She stopped at the dining hall to get coffee. The black liquid was one of the few Earth things available on the ship. As she waited for her cup to fill, she heard voices behind her. "Did you hear the human stories last night?" The voice belonged to a Nexari. The small gray being was talking to his friend. Men who could lift mountains. Women who turned people to stone with their eyes. Do they really believe such things? His friend made a squeaking sound that meant, yes. My research shows their entire culture is built on these fantasies. How did they even develop space travel? With such thinking? Elena's hand tightened around her coffee cup. She walked away before she could hear more. In the formal meeting room, things got worse. The morning session was about trade agreements between coalition worlds. Elena represented Earth's interests, but every time she spoke, she saw smirks on alien faces. When she suggested new shipping routes through human space, Counselor Zethvar's crystal body flashed yellow. Elena had learned this meant he was thinking hard about something. "Ambassador," he said slowly, "these routes you propose, are they based on actual star charts? Or perhaps on some human legend about magical pathways through space?" Laughter rippled through the room. Elena felt her face burn red, but she kept her voice steady. "They are based on real navigation data, Counselor. Our survey ships have mapped these routes over the past 5 years." "Ah," said Zethvar. "Real data. How refreshing to hear humans speak of reality instead of fantasy." The insults continued all week. During break times, aliens would gather in small groups and share human myths they had looked up. They found them all very funny. The Kree enjoyed the story of Odysseus. A man lost at sea for 10 years? Ambassador Ziktar clicked with amusement. Meeting sirens and cyclops? Even human ocean voyages today take only days with proper technology. The Dolmari loved to mock the tale of Atlantis. A city that sank beneath the waves, Counselor Murthai said from her tank. My people have lived underwater for millions of years. If such a place existed, we would know about it. The Vorthan, the tree-like beings, rustled their leaves whenever anyone mentioned human stories about talking animals or magic forests. To them, who were plants that could think and speak, the idea seemed backward. By the fourth day, other humans on the ship were getting angry. Captain James Rodriguez, who commanded the human security detail, came to Elena's quarters. "Ma'am," he said, his jaw tight with frustration, "my people are ready to start a fight. The aliens won't stop making jokes." Today, a Cree called Sergeant Williams, the little human with big dreams, when he mentioned Earth's military traditions. Elena poured herself another coffee. Her hands shook slightly. "We have to be patient, Captain. This is about more than hurt, feelings. Earth's full membership in the coalition depends on these talks going well." "But they're disrespecting everything we are," Rodriguez said. "Our stories, our culture, our history. How much are we supposed to take?" Elena did not have a good answer. She felt the weight of her job crushing down on her. If she lost her temper, if she said the wrong thing, Earth could lose its place in the galaxy's most powerful alliance. The breaking point came on the fifth day. The afternoon session was about military cooperation. Each species shared how their forces would work together in future conflicts. The Zephyrians talked about their computer-guided weapons that never missed. The Cree described their armor that could stop any known projectile. The Dolmari explained their underwater assault techniques. When Elena's turn came, she began to describe human military traditions, the codes of honor that guided human soldiers, the way human units would never leave a wounded comrade behind, the spirit that had helped them fight so hard in the recent war. "Human forces have always shown great courage," she said. "Our soldiers fight not just for victory but for each other. This brotherhood has made them effective far beyond what their numbers might suggest." Ambassador Ziktar raised one of his forearms. "Ambassador Vasquez, are these more of your people's fantasy stories? Tales of impossible bravery?" Elena felt something cold form in her stomach. "No. These are documented military practices, real events from real battles." "Ah, but how can we tell the difference?" Ziktar's black eyes gleamed. "Yesterday you told us about humans who could kill monsters with their bare hands. Today you speak of soldiers who perform miracles in battle. Where does your mythology end and your history begin?" Other aliens made sounds of agreement. Elena saw nods and gestures that meant the same thing across dozens species. They thought she was lying. "Our military records are open for inspection," Elena said, her voice getting louder despite her efforts to stay calm. "Any coalition member can verify. Records can be enhanced," said Zethvar carefully, "especially by a species that clearly has trouble separating fact from fiction." The room went very quiet. Elena felt like she had been slapped. They were not just mocking human culture anymore. They were calling humans liars. Ziktar was not finished. He stood up on his 6 legs, making himself taller than anyone else in the room. "In fact," he said slowly, "I begin to wonder if human contributions to our recent victory were as significant as reported. Perhaps what humans call tactical genius was simply luck. Perhaps their heroic actions were exaggerated for effect." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her hands. It hit the floor and shattered, sending hot liquid across the room. Every eye turned to her. "Our people died in that war," she said, her voice barely controlled. "Human blood was spilled on every major battlefield. Our soldiers—" "Yes, yes," Ziktar waved a dismissive arm. "I am sure humans fought bravely. But the stories we hear, ships holding off entire fleets, soldiers fighting for days without rest, impossible last-minute victories, they sound very much like your ancient myths. All very dramatic. All very unlikely." Elena stood up so fast her chair fell backward. The sound echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. How dare you? She whispered. Ziktar tilted his insect head. I dare speak the truth, Ambassador. Your species seems unable to tell a simple story without adding impossible elements. This makes us question everything you claim. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. How could she defend the memory of fallen human heroes to beings who thought courage itself was fantasy? The silence stretched on. Elena realized that everyone was staring at her, waiting to see what she would do. Before she could decide, the meeting room door opened with a soft hiss. A figure stepped inside. A human figure Elena had not expected to see. The entire room turned to look at the newcomer. Even the aliens seemed surprised. Elena's heart stopped. Standing in the doorway was Colonel Marcus Chen. Colonel Marcus Chen stood in the doorway like a ghost from the war. Elena had heard he was in a medical center on Earth, recovering from his wounds. But here he was, wearing a simple gray uniform with no decorations. His left leg seemed stiff when he walked. 3 long scars ran down the right side of his face. His dark eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in every alien face. The silence was complete. Even the Dolmari stopped moving in their water tanks. Elena knew who Colonel Chen was. Everyone in the coalition military knew that name. Iron Wolf, they called him. The human who had held Kepler's gate for 3 days against impossible odds. The man who had saved the 7th Fleet when all hope was lost. Colonel, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. I did not know you were on the ship. Chen walked into the room with careful steps. His injured leg made a soft scraping sound against the floor. I came to see the peace talks, Ambassador, to see what our war bought us. He looked around the room again. His eyes stopped on Ziktar, who was still standing tall on his 6 legs. I heard voices from the corridor. Chen said quietly. Something about human military records being questioned? Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had let her emotions show. A diplomat should never do that. There was a misunderstanding about whether humans lie, Chen interrupted. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. About whether our people really did what the reports say they did. Ziktar's black eyes focused on the human colonel. You must understand our confusion. The claims made about human military performance seem enhanced. Like your mythology, they describe impossible things. Chen nodded slowly. I see. You think we tell tall tales about our soldiers? We think your species has trouble with accuracy, said Zethvar. His crystal body flashed orange, which meant he was being careful with his words. The same minds that created stories of men who could lift mountains also write your military reports. Other aliens made sounds of agreement. Elena wanted to defend her people, but something in Chen's expression made her stay quiet. That is interesting, Chen said. He moved to an empty chair near the front of the room. When he sat down, Elena heard him let out a small breath of pain. May I tell you a story? The question surprised everyone, Elena most of all. Colonel, she said quickly, perhaps this is not the right time. Actually, Chen said, looking at her with tired eyes, I think this is exactly the right time. He turned back to the aliens. But I want to be clear about something first. I am not going to tell you myths or legends. I am going to tell you about things that happened, things I saw with my own eyes. Ziktar made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. More stories of impossible human heroics? Real events, Chen said firmly. Documented by coalition observers, recorded by military computers, witnessed by alien officers who are probably still alive today. The room stayed silent. Elena could feel tension building like electricity before a storm. You want to know about human military performance? Chen asked. Let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler's Gate. Elena's heart skipped. She knew that name. Every human in the coalition knew it. Chen leaned back in his chair, his scarred face thoughtful. 3 years ago, the enemy launched their final offensive. 500 ships all heading for the Kepler system. If they took it, they would have a clear path to 12 coalition worlds, including Earth. He paused, his eyes distant like he was seeing the battle again. The Coalition had 37 ships to stop them. That was all we could gather in time. The enemy had better weapons, better armor, better everything. On paper, it should have been a massacre. Zethvar's crystal body flashed yellow. Military? Records show that Coalition forces held the system. How is this possible with such odds? That is exactly what I am going to tell you, Chen said. But first let me ask you something. What do you know about human tactical doctrine? The question caught the aliens off guard. Elena could see them looking at each other, unsure how to respond. Human forces are... Ziktar started, then stopped. Your species is physically weak compared to most Coalition members. Your technology is adequate but not exceptional. Your ships are smaller and less powerful. All true, Chen agreed. So how do you think 37 Coalition ships with humans making up 60% of the crews held off 500 enemy vessels? Superior positioning, suggested Merthai from her water tank. Lucky timing, offered another alien. Chen shook his head. No, we held because of something your species do not understand. Something you think is mythology. Elena felt her pulse quicken. She had no idea where Chen was going with this. You see, Chen continued, humans have a different relationship with impossible odds than other species. When you face a situation where logic says you cannot win, you retreat. You regroup. You find a better position. That is rational behavior, said Zethvar. Survival is the primary goal of any thinking being. Exactly, Chen said. But humans, we do something else. When we know we cannot win, when every computer says we are going to die, we do not retreat. He stood up slowly, favoring his injured leg. We attack. The word hung in the air like a challenge. At Kepler's gate, Chen said, we knew we were going to lose. Every projection showed the same result. Enemy victory in 4 hours. Complete destruction of Coalition forces. He walked to the front of the room, his steps measured and careful. So we decided to make those 4 hours count. We decided that if we were going to die, we would take as many of them with us as possible. Elena found herself holding her breath. Even though she knew how the battle ended, Chen's words made it feel immediate and real. What happened next? Chen said, looking directly at Ziktar. You would probably call mythology. I am going to call it Tuesday. The alien's clicking stopped completely. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the room. It was not a pleasant expression. Let me tell you what 37 ships can do when they are crewed by humans who have decided that today is a good day to die. Chen walked to the center of the room. His footsteps echoed in the complete silence. Every alien eye was fixed on him. The Battle of Kepler's Gate, he began, started at 0600 hours on March 15th. I was commanding the destroyer Relentless. Captain Sarah Martinez was on the orbital defense platform. Commander David Kim led the fighter squadrons. He stopped and looked at Elena. Ambassador, you have access to Coalition military files. Please confirm that these are real people, not characters from human stories. Elena quickly accessed her tablet. Her fingers moved across the screen. Captain Sarah Martinez, decorated officer, Kepler's Gate Defense Command. Commander David Kim, fighter pilot, awarded the Coalition Star of Valor. All records verified. Chen nodded. Thank you. Now, when the enemy fleet arrived, we knew we had maybe 4 hours before they broke through. Our computers calculated that we could destroy perhaps 50 of their ships before they overran us. Zethvar's crystal body flashed blue. A ratio of 50 to 500 is still hopeless. Yes, Chen agreed. Any logical species would have retreated. But Captain Martinez did something your computers would call impossible. Chen's voice got quieter, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear him. She looked at the tactical display and said, I am not leaving my post. Then she started sending out new orders. Not retreat orders, attack orders. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. Elena could see confusion on their faces. The enemy came at us in waves. Chen continued. Their first assault destroyed 6 of our ships in 10 minutes. We should have pulled back. Instead, Martinez ordered all defense platforms to increase their firing rate. Chen touched the scars on his face without seeming to notice. Here is what your computers cannot understand. When Martinez gave that order, she knew it would burn out the platform's weapons systems. She knew that once they overheated, they could not be fixed. She was choosing to fight harder now, even though it meant fighting weaker later. Ziktar made a clicking sound. That is not logical strategy. No, Chen said. It is not. But it worked. The increased fire rate destroyed 30 enemy ships in the first hour. 30 ships they were not expecting to lose. Elena found herself remembering the official reports she had read. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was studied in military schools across the coalition, but hearing it from someone who was there made it feel different. By hour 2, Chen said, Martinez's weapons were failing. Half our fighter squadrons were destroyed. The enemy was closing in on the inner defense ring. He paused, his eyes distant. That is when Commander Kim did something that still shows up in Kree tactical manuals as an example of impossible human behavior. Ziktar's head tilted forward. Elena knew this meant he was very interested. Kim's fighter wing was down to 8 ships. They were facing 40 enemy bombers heading for the civilian evacuation ships. The math was simple. 8 fighters cannot stop 40 bombers. Chen smiled again. That same cold expression from before. Kim opened a channel to his pilots. I heard the transmission because all our communications were linked. He said, well, boys and girls, looks like we are going to find out what 8 fighters can really do. The room was so quiet, Elena could hear the air recycling systems humming. Then Kim did something that appears in no military manual anywhere. He ordered his fighters to ram the enemy bombers. Several aliens made shocked sounds. The Dolmari began moving rapidly in their tanks. But that would be suicide, said Mirthai. Yes, Chen said simply. It would be. Except Kim was not ordering them to die. He was ordering them to make their deaths count. Chen walked closer to the alien delegates. Kim and his pilots flew straight at those bombers. At the last second, they ejected from their fighters. The unmanned ships hit the enemy formation like missiles. 23 bombers destroyed. The remaining 17 were damaged and easy targets for the defense platforms. Elena's throat felt tight. She had read this in reports, but hearing Chen tell it made her eyes water. 8 pilots ejected into space, Chen continued. 5 were rescued. 3 died when their suits ran out of air. But those 3 saved 8,000 civilians on the evacuation ships. Sethavar's body was flashing multiple colors now. Elena had never seen a Zephyrian do that before. This Kim person, the alien said slowly, he sacrificed his own people for strangers? He sacrificed his people for coalition citizens, Chen corrected. Human, Zephyrian, Kree, Dolmari. It did not matter to him what species they were. Chen returned to the front of the room. By hour 3, we had lost 28 of our 37 ships. The enemy still had over 300 vessels. Any computer would say the battle was over. He looked directly at Elena. That is when Captain Martinez made her final decision. Her defense platform was heavily damaged. Life support was failing. Her weapons were almost gone. The logical choice was to evacuate. Elena found herself whispering, "What did she do?" She sent her crew to the escape pods, Chen said. All of them except the essential personnel. Then, she took manual control of the platform's remaining weapons. Chen's voice got even quieter. For the next 6 hours, Captain Martinez stayed at her post. Alone, coordinating the defense of the evacuation routes. Her platform lost life support after 4 hours. She kept fighting in a vacuum suit. When that ran out of air, she rigged an emergency oxygen tank to last 2 more hours. Elena could not breathe. She knew how this story ended, but she had never heard the details. The medical report said Martinez died at her post, Chen continued. But the tactical logs show she was still sending firing coordinates up until 3 minutes before the evacuation ships reached safe jump distance. The alien sat in stunned silence. 6 hours, Ziktar said finally. She fought for 6 hours while dying. While dead, Chen corrected. The medical team that found her said she had been clinically dead for the last 40 minutes, but the computer logs show weapons fire continuing until the very end. Chen looked around the room at every alien face. "Now," he said, "let me tell you why this story matters. You have been laughing at human myths, stories of heroes who fight monsters they cannot defeat, heroes who die for strangers, heroes who keep fighting even when they should be dead." He pointed at his tablet. "Everything I just told you is in coalition military files, verified by alien witnesses, recorded by computer systems that cannot lie." Elena suddenly understood where Chen was going. Her heart began to race. "Captain Martinez," Chen said slowly, "died defending people she would never meet. Just like the heroes in our old stories, Commander Kim sacrificed himself for strangers, just like the legends we tell our children." The room erupted in voices as aliens began talking to each other in their own languages. Chen raised his hand. "For silence." "You want to know the difference between human mythology and human history?" he asked. The room went quiet again. "There is no difference." The aliens stared at Chen like he had just said the stars were made of water. Elena could see their minds trying to process what they had heard. Zethvar was the first to speak. His crystal body flashed red, which Elena knew meant confusion or disbelief. "Colonel, you cannot mean that literally. Mythology consists of impossible events. What you described, while impressive, was achieved through technology and tactics." Chen shook his head slowly. "No, counselor. You are missing the point completely." He walked back to his chair and sat down carefully. The pain in his leg seemed to be getting worse. "Let me tell you about Hercules," Chen said. "The human myth you all found so amusing yesterday. The man who could lift mountains and kill monsters with his bare hands." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Where was he going with this? "Hercules completed 12 impossible tasks," Chen continued. "Tasks that should have killed him. Tasks that logic said could not be done." Ziktar clicked impatiently. "Yes, we heard this story. Obviously fictional." "Is it?" Chen asked. "Let me tell you about Sergeant Maria Santos, 3rd Marine Division." Chen's voice took on the same quiet tone he had used for the battle stories. 2 years ago, Santos was part of a rescue mission on Kepler-7. Enemy forces had captured a coalition medical station. 50 doctors and nurses were trapped inside. Elena pulled up her tablet again. She was beginning to understand what Chen was doing. "The building was designed to hold a maximum of 200 people, Chen said. "The enemy had rigged it with explosives. If anyone tried to break in, they would blow the whole structure." Chen looked at Ziktar. "How much do you think a building like that weighs, Ambassador?" The Kree's black eyes reflected the room's lights. "Several thousand tons, including the foundation." "Santos went in alone," Chen said. "She could not use explosives. She could not use heavy weapons. She could not even use her suit's power assistance because the enemy sensors would detect it." Chen paused, letting that sink in. "So she did what?" "Hercules would do. She used her bare hands." Several aliens made sounds of disbelief. "Impossible," said Murthai from her water tank. "No being can move that much weight without mechanical assistance." "The rescue was recorded by coalition drones," Chen said calmly. "Santos spent 14 hours digging through the building's foundation, lifting concrete blocks that weighed more than her entire body, moving steel beams that should have crushed her." Elena found the file on her tablet. Her hands were shaking as she read. "Coalition records confirm," she said, her voice barely audible. "Sergeant Santos single-handedly excavated an emergency tunnel, rescued 53 medical personnel. Total weight moved 4,200 tons." The room erupted in voices again. Aliens were speaking rapidly in their own languages, their sounds mixing together into chaos. Chen waited for quiet. 4,000 tons, he repeated. Moved by one human woman in 14 hours. No machines, no help. Just her hands and her will. Zethvar's body was flashing so many colors Elena could not keep track of them. "But how?" the Zephyrian asked. "Human physiology cannot support such performance." "That is exactly right," Chen said. "It cannot. Under normal circumstances, Santos should have died of exhaustion after the first hour. Her muscles should have torn apart. Her bones should have snapped." Chen stood up again, ignoring the obvious. pain in his leg. But she was not operating under normal circumstances. She was operating under human circumstances. Elena felt like the room was spinning around her. You see, Chen continued, other species fight until they calculate they cannot win. Then they stop. It is logical. It is reasonable. It is smart. He looked around the room at every alien face. Humans fight until they are dead, and sometimes we fight a little longer than that. Chen's scarred face was completely serious. Your myths tell stories of beings who know their limits, he said. Human myths tell stories of beings who ignore their limits completely. Ziktar made a clicking sound that Elena had never heard before. You are saying, the Cree said slowly, that your mythology is not fantasy. It is instruction. Now you are beginning to understand, Chen said. Elena felt pieces clicking together in her mind. The stories her grandmother had told her as a child. The heroes who never gave up. The impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Every human child grows up hearing these stories, Chen said. Perseus killing Medusa, David defeating Goliath, Beowulf fighting the dragon. We do not tell them these stories because we think they are pretty tales. Chen's voice got harder. Tell them these stories so they know what humans are capable of when everything depends on it. The room was dead silent now. Even the air recycling system seemed to have stopped. Captain Martinez fought for 6 hours while dying because she grew up hearing about heroes who never abandoned their posts, Chen said. Commander Kim sacrificed himself because he knew that was what heroes do. Sergeant Santos moved 4,000 tons because she learned as a child that humans do not accept the word impossible. Elena understood now, completely and terrifyingly. Your species, Chen continued, looking directly at Ziktar, have been mocking our instruction manual. The words hit the room like a physical blow. When you laughed at stories of humans fighting monsters, Chen said, you were laughing at our military doctrine. When you called our myths primitive fantasies, you were dismissing our tactical philosophy. Chen walked toward the door, each step deliberate despite his injury. Humans do not tell stories about heroes because we wish we could be like them, he said without turning around. We tell stories about heroes because we need our children to know what they will be expected to do when the universe tries to kill them. He stopped at the doorway and looked back one final time. The coalition won this war because humans brought something to the battlefield that your computers could not calculate, something your logic could not predict. Elena found herself holding her breath. We brought the absolute refusal to accept defeat, Chen said. Even when defeat is the only logical outcome. He stepped toward the corridor, then paused. Oh, and Ambassador Ziktar, Chen said quietly. The Kree's head snapped up. The next time you want to question human military records, you might want to remember something. Chen's smile was cold as winter. Every impossible thing in those reports actually happened. And the humans who did those impossible things learned how to do them from stories you think are lies. Chen walked out of the room, leaving behind a silence so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. She looked around at the alien faces. Their expressions had changed completely. The mockery was gone. The condescension was gone. In their place was something Elena had never seen aliens show toward humans before. Fear. Because they finally understood what humans really were. They were the species that turned mythology into military doctrine. They were the beings who made impossible things happen because their children's stories told them those things had always been possible. They were warriors who had been trained from birth to ignore the difference between fantasy and reality, and they had just spent a week insulting those warriors' cultural heritage. Elena stood up slowly, her diplomat training finally returning. Shall we continue with the trade negotiations? She asked politely. Nobody answered. They were all too busy recalculating what it meant to have humans as allies or enemies.